This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. Today, the Trump administration is deciding on its course of action on how to deal with Saudi Arabia in the disappearance and likely murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And did the controversial Senate hearings on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh give Republicans a momentum boost going into next month's midterm elections? Plus, a visit with the new cast of the CBS show God Friended Me. All those stories and more in this half hour of CBN NewsWatch. We're going to begin right now with that ongoing mystery and disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Despite earlier reports, Turkish officials played an audio tape of Khashoggi's murder for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Both Turkey's foreign minister and Pompeo say that did not happen. And an important shift, President Donald Trump is now all but confirming Khashoggi is dead. He promises very severe punishment if Saudi Arabia is behind the reporter's disappearance and death. CBN News chief political analyst David Brody said on CBN News Faith Nation, however the president responds, he will have leverage in mind.
They have this arms deal. We know about that. All right. So that's a major relationship right there. Beyond that, there's one word called oil. They control the oil production as it relates to OPEC. They're basically the de facto leading member of OPEC. And so you put all that together, and in Trump's mind, he's thinking, wait a minute, I got to go careful on this because I have relationships to deal with.
CBN senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon joins us now with more on the mystery that's gripped the world. So, Jennifer, what can you tell us about this tape Turkish officials claim they have?
Yeah, well, Ephraim, they say they have this audio recording that shows that shortly after Khashoggi entered the consulate in Istanbul that he was attacked. And after an 8-minute struggle, he died and was dismembered. And they've also released some video that shows around the time of Khashoggi's disappearance, his apparent murder, that 15 Saudi nationals arrived in Istanbul, including one man who has close security ties to the crown prince. And so they're being dubbed as this Saudi hit squad, if you will. So this is all very unusual and suspicious, and both Saudi and Turkish officials are investigating.
So do we have any indication as to how the Saudis are trying to spin this one?
Well, they're certainly going to try to spin it in favor of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. You know, he is working to really restructure his country. He has this program. It's on billboards everywhere in Saudi Arabia called Saudi Vision 2030. And it's an economic plan. He wants to restructure the kingdom's economy. Right now, it is based solely on oil. And he knows that that is not going to last forever. So he's really working to restructure the nation's economy. He's also instituted a number of social changes that we have reported on, women being able to drive. But there's a lot of scrutiny because along with some of these social changes, he's also, continuing to jail people who disagree with him, which is why there's so much suspicion surrounding Khashoggi's disappearance, because he was critical of the Crown Prince and his vision for the country. So certainly there's going to be a lot of spin for, trying to protect the Crown Prince. And there are already some reports that indicate there may be a fall person that they're going to blame this all on. But that's going to, be revealed in the coming hours and days. All
right. And we will be watching. CBN senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon, thank you.
Thank you.
Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. U.S. and Mexican officials have agreed on a plan to handle the approaching migrant caravan. Fox News reports Mexican officials say they've requested the intervention of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to establish shelters along its southern border. UN officials at the shelters will decide which ones might have legitimate claims for refugee status. White House officials say if an individual evades the new system and breaches the U.S.-Mexico border, they will allow the refugees to be returned to Mexico. The U.S. no longer has to house them until their cases are heard. Federal prosecutors have opened an investigation of child sexual abuse by Roman Catholic priests in Pennsylvania. This comes after a report over the summer found that 301 priests molested more than 1,000 children over 7 decades, and the church leadership had covered it up. Officials say 7 of the 7 of the state's 8 dioceses received subpoenas seeking secret and historical archives and confidential files. This is the first time the federal government intervened in the Catholic Church. The U.S. has placed its main diplomatic mission to the Palestinians under the authority of its embassy to Israel. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the move Thursday. Officials say it is the latest attempt by the Trump administration to align with Israeli government views. Critics say the merge will spark further conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. You can find more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. Every year, the March for Life is held in January on the anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision, which legalized abortion back in 1973. And each year, the march comes up with a theme for its event. The one that's been chosen for next year is meant to show the pro-life movement is based on a solid scientific foundation and not false beliefs or misunderstanding about what science has learned about the unborn. Paul Strand was on Capitol Hill for the announcement of next year's theme.
Those who would pit science against the pro-life cause would find they don't really have a logical leg to stand on. At least they would have found that out today if they'd been here on Capitol Hill for the March for Life's announcement of its 2019 theme.
Unique from day one, pro-life is pro-science.
Jeannie Mancini heads up the March for Life.
So many who are abortion advocates erroneously try to paint life and science as being in conflict, and it's just not true. So we thought we'd revisit the facts, Biology 101.
Science validates pro-life ethics because it's simple biology. Your life began at conception, at fertilization. You are the same individual organism, to use the biological term now, that you were when you were a one-celled organism.
David DeLayden has been sued by Planned Parenthood after embarrassing undercover videos his group took revealed the abortion giant is in the business of harvesting unborn baby parts for sale.
Especially in the body parts procurement business, from the abortion doctors to the middleman harvesting companies to the end user researchers, that the body parts of our unborn brothers and sisters are only valuable for sale and for experimentation because they're exactly like any of us and indistinguishable. And if we don't recognize that, that's what opens the door to atrocities like Kermit Gosnell.
The March for Life this coming year will be on the National Mall January 18th. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Up next, did the politically brutal controversy over Brett Kavanaugh energize Republican voters and improve their chances in next month's midterm elections? And what is the Trump administration doing to protect the voting process in those elections? We're going to have those stories when we come back. As Election Day nears for the midterms, the push to galvanize voters is on. Both Democrats and Republicans are reporting a boost in support and fundraising following Justice Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation battle. And as CBN's Jenna Browder reports, the Kavanaugh confrontation in the Senate may have woken up an otherwise sleepy Republican base.
The countdown to Election Day is on as Democrats and Republicans battle over the control of Congress. On both sides, the message is simple. Everyone must vote. The big question, who will actually turn out?
You know, if there's anything that excites Republican voters, it's the Supreme Court.
Kayleigh McEnany, national spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee, says she's confident GOP voters know what's at stake.
But what's interesting here in particular, we're seeing the 2016 effect play again. A Pew poll showed a few months ago, 1 month ago, I should say, a 12-point gap, Democrats ahead of Republicans. That has narrowed to just 2 in the wake of the post-Kavanaugh revelations and confirmation process.
Axios calls it the Brett bounce. Up until the contentious Kavanaugh Supreme Court fight, Democrats seem to have most of the energy. But now the polling pendulum appears to be swinging. In North Dakota, for example, a Fox News poll shows Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp down 12 points from her Republican challenger, Representative Kevin Cramer. Last month, she was only down 4 points. And an NPR PBS NewsHour Martis poll finds Democratic enthusiasm from earlier this year has all but disappeared.
My sense in covering politics in 2018 is that anger is the single most unifying force, galvanizing force you can have.
ABC News political director Rick Klein says anger is fueling both sides, and one survey gives Democrats a slight edge heading into November. The Washington Post Schar School survey shows likely voters in 69 House districts prefer Democratic candidates to Republican candidates, 50 to 46%. Klein says the Democrats' loss in the Kavanaugh confirmation could translate to a midterm win.
if you lose a battle, there's nothing better to motivate your base to go out there and vote the next time. And by that I mean, Republicans, they get their Supreme Court pick. That means Democrats are going to say, well, we got to go do something to try to change this.
But each of you will have a chance in just 4 weeks to render your verdict on the Democrats' conduct at the ballot box.
President Trump is also banking on Kavanaugh's confirmation and the Democrats' handling of it.
You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob.
In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
With the midterm elections less than 3 weeks away and early voting already underway in some states, what is the Trump administration doing to protect our voting process? CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales brings us the story.
This midterm election is being described as one of the most watched and most important in American history. Although voters aren't going to choose an American president, the Trump administration is going to be a crucial factor. The majority on Capitol Hill could certainly swing, with 33 U.S. Senate seats and all 435 House seats up for grabs. Homeland Security and other intelligence agencies have ongoing operations in all 50 states, bracing for whatever foreign adversaries will bring.
We have an information sharing analysis center. We have sensors, network intrusion sensors out, such that about 90% of people who vote in this election will be voting in an area that's covered by a sensor.
DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen says teams are conducting vulnerable assessments and scans of voting machines. Nielsen adds more than 1,000 state and local election jurisdictions are working together to share information faster. It's important to note, however, that's a small number given that there are some 10,000 local election jurisdictions.
Some are hiring third parties, some are working with us. There's some states that are utilizing the National Guard. There's a variety of ways in which you can bring your capability and capacity up to speed. Each state is doing it a little bit differently.
On Election Day, DHS will set up a situational awareness room, a virtual place where election officials throughout the country can share information quickly. Just weeks ago, Vice President Mike Pence sounded the alarm on China, getting involved in election interference.
To put it bluntly, President Trump's leadership is working, and China wants a different American president.
Cybersecurity experts say while the Russians have received the attention, the Chinese have operated under the radar with a strategic long-term plan to influence the 2020 presidential election. Another frightening fact, Washington-based legal watchdog group Judicial Watch conducted an election integrity study. It found that the number of adults registered to vote is larger, 3.5 million larger than the number of adults actually alive in America. A staggering discrepancy that's an engraved invitation to voter fraud.
If people know there are names there who have died or moved away or otherwise ineligible, they potentially can vote in their names, and that's where you get the fraud.
Despite the disturbing facts, intelligence officials say they are ready.
I think this is probably going to be the most secure election in the modern era because of the amount of work we've done with state and local election officials who are, by the Constitution and by law, responsible for administering elections, federal elections.
It's still possible we could see an October surprise that could change the course of an election. Cybersecurity experts say in this era, they wouldn't be surprised if hacked material surfaces at the last minute. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, my conversation with the cast of the new CBS show, God Friended Me. We've got the story when we come back. The new fall television season is in full swing, and the CBS drama God Friended Me is seeing a lot of buzz. It debuted with big ratings, attracting more than 10 million viewers. So we traveled to New York City to chat with the cast and to visit the set.
There is no proof of God anywhere in the universe. We will debate that and more on today's episode of The Millennial Prophet. I am your host, Miles Feiner, reminding you that there is no God and that is okay.
An outspoken atheist.
I thought I had it all figured out, but then something happened and it changed my life forever. I got a friend request from God.
What? Accepts a friend request from God. And so begins the CBS series God Friended Me.
Rolling.
Starring Brandon Michael Hall, who we visited on set in New York City.
Miles Feiner, how big of a stretch is this character for Brandon and Michael Hall?
No, Miles is a big stretch. I grew up in a household full of religion, and I grew up going to church at least 3 to 4 or 5 times a day on a Sunday, you know. So to go from going from understanding what faith and religion means to me and then playing a role where it's completely taken away and he's finding his own way back, I think it's a huge opportunity for me to learn a lot, you know. First, I'm learning about the Bible, I'm learning about other religions, other spiritualities, but I'm also gaining a closer understanding with myself, you know. So those are the roles you really want to sink your teeth into.
Let me get this straight. You're being catfished by someone calling themselves God on Facebook.
Yes, and I need your hacker skills to give me their IP address.
Keep your voice. How many times I gotta tell you I'm not a hacker, okay? I'm a video game enthusiast. Okay, what do you know?
This is the set for where Miles Finer works, Identity Seal, a company charged with safeguarding people's identity. At the same time, Miles is struggling with a big part of who he used to be, and something his father still is.
A man of faith, a minister, in fact.
This podcast of yours.
You think you're helping people, but you're not.
That's not true.
You are taking away people's hope.
And you're telling them that God is watching over us. You know better than anyone that's not true.
You don't think that what happened made me question my faith?
Joe Morton.
You've gotten yourself into a bit of trouble, Olivia, and I'm here to fix it.
America's favorite diabolical dad in the hit series Scandal plays Miles's father in God Friended Me.
Have you ever undergone a place where you were sort of at a crisis faith moment?
I don't know that I lost my father when I was 10 years old, under some very suspicious circumstances, at a time when, you know, I'd been baptized Catholic and so on and so forth. I don't know that I blamed anyone at that time other than myself. But that's, again, a kind of loss of faith in your own humanity.
Look, I know the nurse in the photo is your mom. She left when you were a kid, right?
Why do you even care?
When I was 8, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I prayed for a miracle, and then it happened. She went to full remission. The doctors couldn't even explain it.
I don't understand. If God answered your prayers, why don't you believe?
Because on the way home from the hospital, she died in a car accident.
Miles.
Look, I don't know who's behind this or why they chose me, but I do know that your mom is still out there. I'd give anything to say the same.
The God account connects Miles to people in need.
I don't know who's behind this or why they chose me. They sent me names. They want me to help people. Hey, somebody stop that guy! When you pulled me back, I realized, you know, I didn't want to die. Thank you.
A storyline 10 million viewers tuned in to see in the very first episode.
There's a lot of great buzz surrounding this show. You had more than 10 million viewers first episode out.
So amazing.
Why do you think people are so drawn to this storyline?
You know, I think that everyone wants to talk about things like faith and politics and connectivity and relationships that just no one knows how to. And I think our show does a really great job at allowing that conversation to happen without judgment.
People say that God has a plan for all of us. Well, I never believed that to be true. But then he friended me, and it kind of turned my life upside down. Not that I think it's God, but in these crazy times we live in, we owe it to ourselves to ask the tough questions.
Still ahead here on CBN NewsWatch, he's been called America's biggest serial killer, abortionist Kermit Gosnell. Now the story behind his crimes, his trial, and the lack of major media coverage is the focus of a new movie. We'll have the review of the film in just a moment. Stay with us. It's the big screen movie. Major media has basically ignored Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer. It is based on the true story of Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell and the trial that sent him to prison. Here's a look at the film from Focus on the Family.
We're looking for anything that looks like drugs or paraphernalia.
The movie Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer, focuses in on the story of Dr. Kermit Gosnell, an inner-city Philadelphia abortionist. But it tells this man's gruesome tale without actually showing the gruesome deeds themselves.
Man, you gotta see this. Is this normal? I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before.
Instead, it helps us understand this man's horrible and deadly choices through his courtroom trial.
Healthy woman goes into a clinic, comes out dead, and there's no police report?
Files have been moved recently.
Look at this.
We watch as gutsy Philadelphia prosecutor Alexis McGuire and a pair of dedicated detectives gather the evidence to make their case that Gosnell had murdered hundreds, maybe even thousands of babies over the course of his career. An atrocity that many knew of, but purposefully chose to ignore.
You are not going to believe what I saw last night.
How many?
So far, we found over 30 of them.
This is a hard story to comprehend due to Gosnell's callousness and even his narcissism. It's the kind of story that stays with you because you'd swear it was all fiction, except that it isn't. Anyone considering this film needs to know that its graphic verbal depictions of how an abortion happens spare little. As difficult as the subject matter is, however, this is an important movie. It's a film that will no doubt change the way some viewers understand the tragedy of abortion. A movie that could help someone make the right choice for an innocent life. I'll give Gosnell a 3 out of 5 for family friendliness. For an in-depth review of this film, or really anything else at your local box office, visit us at PluggedIn.com. Plugging you into the movies, I'm Bob Olszewski for Focus on the Family's Plugged In Movie Review.
Time now for your Friday Faithful. I leave you with this thought. People can shift with the wind and blow in and out of your life, but God's presence is permanent, steady, and sure. If you ever question his presence, it might be a good time to simply be still, and in that stillness begin to know that he is God and he is faithful forever. With that word, I encourage you to make this a fabulous Friday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember that you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing us at newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye and God bless.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this half hour of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Despite earlier reports that Turkish officials played an audio tape of Jamal Khashoggi's murder for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, both Turkey's foreign minister and Pompeo say that did not happen. And in an important shift in position, President Donald Trump is now all but confirming Khashoggi is dead. He promises, quote, very severe punishment if Saudi Arabia is behind the reporter's disappearance and death. CBN News' chief political analyst David Brody said on the CBN News program Faith Nation, however the president responds, he will have leverage in mind.
They have this arms deal. We know about that. All right. So that's a major relationship right there. Beyond that, there's one word called oil. They control the oil production as it relates to OPEC. They're basically the de facto leading member of OPEC. And so you put all that together, and in Trump's mind, he's thinking, wait a minute, I got to go careful on this because I have relationships to deal with.
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin has already pulled out of a major Saudi investment conference. Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you in this hour of the CBN Newsroom. U.S. and Mexican officials have agreed on a plan to handle the approaching migrant caravan. Mexican officials say they have requested the intervention of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to establish shelters along its southern border. UN officials at the shelters will decide which ones might have legitimate claims for refugee status. White House officials say if an individual evades the new system and breaches the U.S. border, it will now be able to return the refugees to Mexico. The new U.S. no longer has to house them until their cases are heard. Federal prosecutors have opened an investigation of child sexual abuse by a Roman Catholic priest in Pennsylvania. This comes after a report over the summer found 301 priests molested more than 1,000 children over 7 decades, and that the church leaders had covered it up. Officials say 7 of the state's 8 dioceses received subpoenas seeking secret and historical archives and confidential files. This is the first time the federal government intervened in the Catholic Church. The U.S. has placed its main diplomatic mission to the Palestinians under the authority of Israel. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the move Thursday. Officials say it is the latest attempt by the Trump administration to align with the Israeli government's views. Critics say the merge will spark further conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people. You can find more on these stories and others at cbnnews.com. ISIS claims it has taken 700 people hostage from a Syrian refugee camp, and the hostages include several American and European citizens. Russia's president told reporters Thursday Islamic militants took the hostages during a raid on a village controlled by U.S.-backed forces. Vladimir Putin also claims the terrorists have executed some of the hostages. They are making demands and are planning to kill more.
What they're saying is that they want about 200 to 300 ISIS fighters that have been captured by U.S. forces to be released. If their demands are not met, they are warning that they will kill 10 hostages every day, according to Russia's president.
We turn now from war-torn Middle East to the silent suffering of military veterans in the U.S. One former U.S. Marine is changing lives all over the world while he's giving all the glory to God. Take a look.
Victor Marks served in the Marine Corps during the 80s, before the wars in the Middle East. Little did he know he would deploy years later to the region as a missionary, where his battlefield experience would come in handy. Marks is the founder of All Things Possible Ministries, which performs what is described as high-risk missions work. His team has worked with thousands of young ISIS victims in northern Iraq, where few missionaries are allowed to travel.
They have no other help. There is no social services. There is no other help. We realize at that point, the prayers they're praying, we are the ones who could actually be an answer to that prayer.
Marks, whose team has helped free and relocate dozens of Christians, is about to embark on his 9th deployment. The ministry is currently building its first orphanage in the area.
The thousands we've been able to help, we know that God has placed us there for a reason.
His work doesn't end on the international mission field. Marks also saw a need closer to home, helping veterans just like himself. He and his wife help serve members and families dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder.
I myself have gone through it, predominantly through issues of my childhood, which is a cause of a lot of acute PTSD later in life, which people often don't know or understand. Even for combat vets, a lot of it was associated with their youth.
His own trauma started at the age of 5 when he was abused and left for dead. After recovering, he suffered a dysfunctional childhood, attending 14 schools, living in 17 different homes, and watching his mother marry 6 times. Years later, those suppressed issues led him to nearly take his own life. Mark says instead of a tragic ending, God used those experiences to help him reach others.
I understood the depth of suffering and pain and literal torture. And God has been so faithful to me to help restore me, my mind, that we've just developed a really simple approach of healing for those who've suffered from PTSD.
All Things Possible produced 2 films which help vets overcome day-to-day battles they face with themselves and their families. The videos are available for free online, and Marks also takes them to show at military bases.
They're both very powerful. They're made for people who don't want to watch a short film, a documentary on PTSD, but they're effective. It works, and we're very grateful to God for that.
The ministry also creates workbooks that can be taken on deployment to use in small groups on the front lines.
God gets all the glory for this, but I'm glad to give credit to the Marine Corps and to the people who pray for us and support the work. It's pretty astounding.
For more information on Victor's ministry and his high-risk missions around the world, you can go to our CBN News webpage. Of course, that is cbnnews.com. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman say they are glad that Pastor Andrew Brunson is finally home.
I'm glad Pastor Brunson has been freed. It's long overdue. I think that he shouldn't have been incarcerated in the first place, but I'm glad he's home.
Pastor Andrew Brunson finally set foot on U.S. soil and headed straight to the Oval Office to meet the man who rescued him. Rescued him without promises, without compromise, without accommodations, without any deals. Pastor Brunson was rescued simply because of the President's commitment to religious freedom, and to the truth. The truth set Pastor Brunson free.
It's now been a week. Pastor Brunson was released last Friday after being incarcerated in Turkey for 2 years on false charges of trying to overthrow the government. The U.S. applied heavy economic pressure on Turkey to release Brunson. Be sure to catch CBN News' exclusive interview with Pastor Brunson on today's 700 Club. Coming up, the miracle boy who survived after being impaled in the face by a meat skewer. See the 1 in a million shot that saved his life. The amazing story is coming up next. It is a story almost too fantastic to believe. A young boy falls onto a foot-long metal pole that pierces his face, and it goes through skin and bone all the way to the back of his skull. Miraculously, just 3 days after surgery, doctors send him home with a clean bill of health. John Jessup traveled to Missouri to talk to the boy's doctors and see what he described as a medical marvel.
I want you to meet 11-year-old Xavier Cunningham. Now, he has this amazing story that he, his family and friends, and anyone who knows it will sum up with one other word, which is
miracle.
Like many boys his age, Xavier loves football, playing outdoors, and spending time with his friends. That all came close to ending earlier this month after a nearly fatal accident.
I was the last one in.
It all started at this treehouse in his backyard, where a swarm of yellow jackets attacked him and his friends. In the rush to escape, Xavier tripped and fell face first onto the ground, landing onto a meat skewer they had found earlier.
And I just felt this burning pain just right in this area. I was there for about 30 seconds, just screaming my head off.
Somehow he managed to get back home to his mom.
He had this metal-looking rod, what I thought was an arrow, coming out of his cheek here.
She was like, "Oh my gosh, who did this to you?"
Gabrielle rushed her son to the ER with a skewer still in place.
Xavier looks over and he goes, "I'm dying, Mom." And I go, "No, you're not. No, you're not. You're gonna be just fine." And he goes, "No, I can feel it." And so he goes, "I want to see Jesus, but not right now." And I go, "It's okay, baby. Jesus is here with us."
Ultimately, they were sent to the University of Kansas Hospital, where they waited as a team of 100 medical staff assembled for the risky procedure.
There was a lot of consideration as to whether or not we should try to make an incision at the back of the neck here and cut this part off.
Miraculously, the skewer pierced the cheekbone under his left eye, missing his brain, spinal cord, and major blood vessels by only a millimeter.
If it hit the carotid artery, which it was immediately adjacent to, I think he probably would have had such dramatic bleeding in such a short amount of time that it would have swelled up in the neck and closed off his airway, and he wouldn't have survived it.
Doctors commend Xavier for keeping calm and never trying to pull out the skewer. They say the odds of missing critical organs was 1 in a million, and expect a full recovery.
Father, we love you. We thank you for being a good dad.
CBN News met Xavier and his family 2 days after his release from the hospital.
First and 10 for the Wildcats.
We chronicled his first outing at the Harrisonville football field, where he hopes one day to be a part of the team.
There he is. Hey!
Our cameras also followed him on his first Sunday back to church, where an entire community rallied to pray for him. During the visit, we talked about the experience.
Can I ask you something real quick? How did you know not to take it out? Did you think about it?
I watched Black Panther, like the end of it, how he just takes it out and dies, and so I was like, nope.
Another lifeline for Xavier while he was in the hospital was a popular worship course the church sang while he was in surgery, and again at his homecoming.
I know there was a song. Let me see.
Reckless Love by Corey Ashton.
Asbury?
Asbury, yeah.
So the lyrics are, "Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending."
Reckless Love of God.
Why did you keep singing it or asking for it to be played?
Well, it's just because our first time at that church that's one of the first songs we listened to, and I was like, this is a good song.
Xavier's parents are grateful their son is alive and that life is returning to normal. They also know their family has an amazing testimony about giving glory to God.
God created those doctors to do phenomenal things, but
there comes a point where we come to the end of ourselves. And this is where we were. No man could change this. Only the God of heaven.
Every day just seeing a miracle in my house. I mean, he's a living, walking miracle. The hand of God was on my son.
That miracle has strengthened Xavier's faith too.
So when you're just getting to know Jesus, you're like, oh, he saved us. He gave his life for us. And but after this, it's just like he truly is the God Almighty.
We pointed out, just like Jesus, he now has visible scars.
Probably right now you're not thinking that they're beautiful, but do you think that maybe God can make them beautiful? Yeah?
He can make everything beautiful.
John Jessup, CBN News in Harrisonville, Missouri.
Still ahead here on CBN NewsWatch, they served our country in Afghanistan and Guam, and these two military vets wound up homeless and living in a car with their 3 children. See how this family was helped and what's being done for the 40,000 other homeless veterans when we come back. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. They sacrifice their lives for our country, but often they can't even afford a place to live when they come home. That is the hard reality for many of our vets and their families. Now, the Veterans Affairs Office is working to change that. Charlene Aaron tells us one family story and how helping many more like them could prevent a growing crisis.
Being 5 is tricky. You never know what to do. Sometimes I wish I was 7 or even 22.
At the age of 6, Christian Samir Graves has accomplished much more than first grade. With the help of his parents, Christian is now an author, radio host, and co-creator of the children's website kidstuff.org. But it's not been an easy road. Just 1 year ago, Christian lived on the streets with his parents, military veterans who fell on tough times after serving in Afghanistan and Guam. It was an experience Christian later wrote about in a book called Being 5.
I have to get my Superman action figure and my nightlight. Can I cook my own dinner? Do I give up all my toys? Mommy, what does it mean to be a big boy?
We couldn't keep up with the rent. We were selling our rings in order to keep the lights on.
His mother, Nikisha, suffers from lupus, a disease that forced her to undergo several surgeries and blood transfusions. That left stepfather Gary, a 12-year Air Force veteran, as sole provider. He couldn't bring in enough money, and they eventually lost their home. It's a predicament facing too many veterans. After leaving the military, life can be difficult.
You go into the civilian world and that check is not the same. You have to pay for your own medical, you have to pay for your own dental. Your grocery bills are going up because you can't go on the base to go shopping. Those things change.
You probably see them each day in the street, unaware that they once fought for your freedom. Today, they now fight invisible enemies of addiction, post-traumatic stress, and economic hardships.
At first, it was hard. You know, we both shed tears, having to sell things, sell clothes, sell electronic items.
Gary says he felt embarrassed, scared, and hopeless.
When you're in a position where you're about to be homeless, it's like you don't want that. Nobody wants that, especially if you head a household and you want to provide for your family. So emotion-wise, it was hard.
It was just as hard for their 3 boys.
They were in school, so it's days, and we didn't have any money to buy them anything else. They couldn't get new shoes, they couldn't get school supplies, they couldn't watch television or go out with their friends or do what kids do. And they understood. They understood why we have to be at McDonald's charging up our phones because we don't have any electricity.
Statistics show that vets make up 17% of our country's homeless population. In 2010, numbers reached as high as 76,000 on the streets. While today's estimates are closer to 40,000, we could see a major increase as thousands of troops prepare to leave Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a potential crisis driving the VA to be more strategic. The goal is to place a veteran in permanent housing within 90 days, but finding a home for a family is twice as difficult. Dr. Priscilla Hankins with the Hampton VA says community and faith-based organizations are stepping up to help.
The VA is very committed to ending homelessness, but we cannot do it alone. It is really a community issue, and working with community partners, homeless agencies, and the community churches really coming together, I think, has been a reason for the success that we've seen.
Gary and Nikisha believe God used Operation Homefront and the VA's Office of Human Affairs to provide for them.
They gave us money to move into our house. They paid the deposit, they paid the first month's rent. They disabled American veterans bought a tree for our kids. They bought gifts. Like, this was during Christmas time, and we didn't know what was gonna happen, but it came all together so beautifully. We just have to trust God that He will take us to where we need to go, and He did. He intervened and stepped right in, and I believe that test, it happened for a reason.
Gary and Nikisha now work at the Hampton VA. They say they want to pay it forward by helping other homeless veterans get back on their feet.
And I know how it feels, to not know when your next meal is going to come from, and you don't know what's going to happen, but you have a support system that's able to help you, and you have somebody that can say, it's going to be okay, I can help you over here.
Would you sign this, please?
Yes, sir.
As for her son, Christian, he's enjoying this new chapter in life, being 6. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
A pastor dressed up as a homeless man and sat outside his church. He showed the results on Facebook and said what he witnessed blew him away. I spoke with Mark Martin earlier this week. He explained exactly what happened.
Now, Dr. James McDonald is the senior pastor of Harvest Bible Chapel in the Chicagoland area. He also leads the Bible ministry Walk in the Word, which people can watch and listen to on TV and radio. McDonald recently posted video of himself dressed as a homeless man with a shaggy gray beard and long gray hair, wearing a flannel jacket with holes in it. He pushed a shopping cart with belongings in it and camped outside his church. Now, he put a cup for donations next to him. Time and time again, the video shows people walking right on by. Some even go out of their way to avoid him. Scriptures appear on the video at times, including Luke 6:32-33, which reads, "And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same." And at one point in the video, you hear McDonald saying, the closer the person is to us and the less common the struggle, the easier it is to love. And eventually you see McDonald pushing the shopping cart through the sanctuary, filled with people, to the front of the church. He walks to the pulpit, takes off his costume, and he tells the congregation about how he's camped out in front of a couple of the church's campuses to see how the church is doing when it's the hardest to love. Ephraim?
What was one of the messages that he shared with his congregation in light of what happened?
Yeah, the evidence is right there. Very interesting question. Well, he told them that their Father in heaven is giving the same graces to the people they find the hardest to love. Matthew 5:45 appeared on the screen of the video, which reads, "For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." McDonald said, if we're going to love like our Father in heaven loves, we don't get to play favorites.
The pastor's post has gone viral, so far getting nearly 780,000 views, but there was a surprise ending to the Facebook video. In spite of the images seen at first, Dr. James McDonald tells the congregation they actually did an awesome job in reaching out to him disguised as a homeless man. The video then proceeds to show how members gave food and money to McDonald, praying with him and showing him the love of Jesus. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'd like to leave you with this Friday faithful thought. People can shift with the wind and blow in and out of your life, but God's presence is permanent, steady, and sure. If you ever question that, it might be a good time to simply sit still and in that stillness begin to know that He is God and He's faithful forever. With that word, I encourage you to make this a fabulous Friday. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about always at cbnnews.com. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. Make it a fabulous Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you right back here come Monday. Goodbye and God bless.